California is at a crossroad. As time moves forward, California will be met with numerous transportation and environmental issues that will challenge the economic and social well-being of the state.
Yeah, I feel like everywhere there's some sort of environmental impact. I feel like in California it has to do a lot with the way we use energy. We rely a lot on fossil fuels, and transportation definitely has things to do with it.
I think there's a huge pollution problem. I think there's road rage problems. I think just overall, there's an insane amount of traffic.
As a commuter, Bay Area traffic is pretty bad on any given day, and if there's bad weather, it's even worse. And then commuting down to LA is something that I feel like nobody should have to do. I feel like that would be a problem. It's such a common corridor of transportation.
The state is in need of a comprehensive solution to combat the growing problems that we face as time moves onward.
This is about keeping the house standing. How are we going to keep the state of California economically viable and vibrant going into the future?
As a Californian, I think they deserve the best, and the best is pretty well defined.
Well, sustainability is about looking after the future today, right? We recognize that we are going to make choices right now that people in 30, 40, 50, and 100 years will be contending with. And so what we want to do is consciously make a better choice now.
California is a big state. At over 163,000 square miles and with a population of just over 38 million residents, California is third largest state in terms of size and the largest in terms of population. And this population is expected to grow. In the next 3 decades, California is projected to add an additional 20 million new people to the state. The question is, how will the state's transportation infrastructure be able to cope with such an increase?
So if you look at California and its growth, its continued growth, it will continue to grow. In fact, we're going to be adding quite a few people if we allow ourselves to go out to 2035 and so on and so forth.
We're going to add the population of the state of New York as we go into the next 30 years. How do you move those people around? We're already congested in many of our city centers. Certainly in Southern California and the Bay Area, we have a great deal of congestion. How do you move those people around?
Now, you add more people to the existing infrastructure we have, and it spells problems because our highway systems are, particularly in urban settings, our freeways have not kept up with the demand. If you add more growth on there, it's just more demand. Our airport hubs, our major airport hubs, with a few exceptions, will be reaching capacity in 2015 to 2020 range, and they will no longer be able to handle our interstate travel here.
Problems within California's transportation infrastructure do not end there. In fact, they exist today.
I certainly think we have significant gridlock in urban areas. We have, I would say that's the number one transportation problem we have.
We have a huge culture of using cars to get everywhere. No one bikes or walks as much as they should, and so we have a huge congestion problem in our freeways.
It's just insane the amount of vehicles on the roadways. When they talk about LA traffic being some of the worst traffic in the United States, they're not kidding.
I would say that in the Bay Area and in kind of probably the metropolitan area, so Bay Area, LA, there is definitely an issue with the age of the roads, the number of people on those roads, and the options for public transit for the people that don't want to be on the roads.
Currently, approximately 170,000 miles of roads and highways run through the entire state, and some are among the busiest in the nation. The Texas Transportation Institute, in their 2011 annual Urban Mobility Report, found that the metropolitan regions of Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, San Jose, Riverside, and Sacramento rank among the top 30 urban areas in the nation with the highest traffic congestion. The estimated costs of the combined metropolitan areas due to lost time and wasted fuel amounts to approximately $6 billion in 2010 alone. When combined with costs from the rest of the state, the total impact exceeds $18.7 billion annually. The interstate system within the state has already run into some major barriers in terms of capacity and traffic flow. Between the period of 1990 and 2004, vehicle miles traveled on the system increased by 36%, while the number of lane miles only increased by 7% during the same time period. This means that interstate usage is increasing 5 times faster than the rate at which additional capacity is being added, which ultimately results in increased congestion. Air traffic is as well affected by this ever-increasing demand for intercity travel. Currently, short-haul flights between Los Angeles and San Francisco are the busiest short-haul air travel markets in the entire United States.
62% of the flights from the Bay Area go to Southern California airports, LA, Ontario, Burbank, San Diego. The state is going to grow by almost 40 million people over the next 30 years. We have to find a way to move those people.
With hundreds of flights, more than 5 million traverse this corridor annually. Other California destinations, like Los Angeles to Sacramento and San Jose to Los Angeles, are as well within the top 20 short-haul markets in the nation. This leads to increased traffic and, of course, delays. 1 out of every 4 flights between Los Angeles and San Francisco is delayed by more than an hour, and as more people begin turning to air travel, this capacity will become limited.
We can't add any more runways. We're not going to build any additional runways. We can't add any more airline gates, so our capacity is limited on the airline side.
So if you put all that together, mobility will decrease. If you have a decrease in mobility, it also has a direct impact on quality of life, whether you measure it by economics, environmental, social equity.
Such impacts have already had an effect on the way Californians move and live.
There's pollution issues,
Air pollution issues and whatnot.
There's definitely the overall global warming, CO2 emissions.
Having so many people dependent on owning their own cars instead of having a lot more reasonable public transportation really contributes to the environmental problem.
With Californians dependent upon their automobiles, congestion continues to be a growing problem not only in terms of cost and efficiency, but in air quality and the environment. Regions like the Los Angeles Basin, Central Valley, and the San Francisco Bay Area are constantly subject to large amounts of auto pollution around the clock. When combined with the further use of fossil fuel in power plants and other facilities, emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, and other various pollutants and greenhouse gases are expected to persist through the years and even increase over time. This pollution can have various consequences on public health, like the development of cancer, asthma, and other diseases and ailments that can be of concern to the public. Pollution as well has a greater effect on the global climate as temperatures around the world rise due to the greenhouse effect and global warming. Reduced mobility also slows down the economy. As infrastructure continues to degrade and the efficiency of transport systems continue to lag, Californians have and will continue to find themselves in a stagnating economy. California is currently in an economic downturn. With 9.8% unemployment, many are still out of work in the state. Many regions within California are even harder hit, with unemployment in the Central Valley at approximately 14%. The reduction in mobility makes the state less economically competitive with other states and with the rest of the world. So how can this puzzle of enhancing mobility be solved? One solution is increasing highway and air capacity.
we are effectively built out in other transportation infrastructure.
We could be looking at trying to build 4,300 new freeway lane miles. Very expensive, as well as takes up more and more land. We'd probably need way in excess of 100 more gates at the airports to provide for more jets. And right now, expanding airports in our major hubs and our urban centers is very difficult. And they're already at capacity or reaching it.
Another potential solution is the strengthening of rail and transit systems within the state. However, such systems at the moment have found themselves in a difficult situation.
Our public transportation system isn't supported enough.
There's a lot of demand, especially during rush hour, for the public transportation that does exist, and I don't think it's sufficient.
Public transportation, depending on where you are, there's really decent public transportation, and such as in the city of San Francisco, they have pretty good public transportation. There's a lot of bus routes. There's BART. There's the train station. There's a lot of different options for you in the inner city. But when you get further away, maybe towards the peninsula, like here in San Mateo, there's not so many bus routes, or maybe there are plenty of bus routes, but the buses aren't running, multiple times through each route. So it gets congested, and there's not too many options, and it's pretty limiting.
However robust California's transit system currently is, public transport infrastructure has been affected by numerous shortfalls in terms of funding, efficiency, and sustainability. A proper catalyst needs to be provided to these systems to ensure that they can continue to operate and flourish in the future. This is especially the case in terms of rail transport. For decades, rail travel has proved as an alternate means of moving people and goods between cities and regions, delivering the products of industry across the continent in an effective manner. California is no exception. Shipping and manufacturing centers in Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area require a means to not only effectively transport materials and goods, but people as well. Commuter, regional, and urban rail systems like BART, Caltrain, and Metrolink generate ridership in the tens of millions each year. Despite such high ridership, commuter rail networks like Caltrain face an uncertain future. Caltrain experiences frequent cost overruns resulting from the high cost of diesel and other factors. As of 2011, this budget deficit is approximately $30 million. Additionally, Caltrain currently does not have a dedicated source of funding. Unlike Los Angeles' Metrolink network, which is funded by dedicated tax dollars from a gas tax and tolls, Caltrain relies on other metropolitan transportation authorities to fund the operation of the system. Unfortunately, in recent years, funding to these authorities has been severely restricted, leading to cuts that have limited Caltrain's range of operation. Combined with rising fuel prices, Caltrain has few options to keep its service available, even though many thousands of San Franciscans currently use the system and ridership is expected to grow. This does not include the prospects of oil in the near future.
The Earth has limited resources. We only have so much oil, so many fossil fuels we can use. Sooner or later, we're going to run out, and oil prices are just going to continue to increase. That's both environmental and economic impact.
As traffic increases, demand for more oil will increase as well, which leads to more drilling and refining of fossil fuels, resulting in water pollution, destruction of natural landscapes, and increased air pollution. Although production of oil may increase, the actual volume of oil remaining will continue to diminish with each passing year. Oil, being a non-renewable resource, will eventually run out, becoming too scarce to economically capture and refine. Such a limited resource threatens California's economy, which already must import oil from foreign nations to meet its transportation, manufacturing, and industrial demands. State subsidies to help combat rising gas prices will as well contribute to additional expenses. Regardless of subsidies, the public will still see higher prices for the foreseeable future, producing a net drag on the economy. With the ever-present transportation and environmental problems that continue to plague our state, and with the absence of a viable method to address such issues, California is in need of a comprehensive solution that can help maximize mobility, provide a catalyst for existing systems, and cope with the expected demand for more transportation from more people, all while maintaining environmental and economic stability.
We can't build our way out of more highways. There just isn't enough money. Plus, the highways do tend to create the opportunity for more sprawl. Whereas if we can focus on density, population density, we can look for transit and other solutions that are more sustainable. So, recognizing that in all of this too, we have to be thinking about sustainability. Sustainability in a sense that if we continue to depend heavily on fossil fuel vehicles, we may have problems. We can not only will we be dealing with the ebb and flow of fossil fuel vehicle prices, fuel prices, we have to deal with the air quality issues and greenhouse gas emissions. How can we position California then to accommodate growth in a more sustainable way? Two components. One would be to introduce something that is more sustainable from an energy standpoint, and two, focus on land use that doesn't that doesn't sprawl. Smart growth is a term that's common. Look for density so that we can be more suited for transit.
We have a legacy of developing programs and projects to sustain our people and the state in an ongoing way for many decades. High-speed rail gives us an opportunity to do that for the next generation of Californians, to allow them to maintain the economic vibrancy of the 8th largest economy in the world, and it sets itself up as being an integral part of that future legacy.
Indeed, high-speed rail may well be a key part of the solution to our current crisis within California. But to many, there is one question on the mind. What is high-speed rail?
I don't know at all.
High-speed rail. I don't know. Self-explanatory. High-speed rail. It's
Train that goes really fast.
A train that goes extremely fast.
High-speed rail is is improving upon the existing rail, and in some cases building new rails that enable trains to travel at higher rates of speed.
So I think that might mean in excess of 50 or 60 miles an hour. I think
fast, efficient, and can cover long distances.
Truly high-speed rail is going to encompass hundreds of miles at a time at least, if not a system that may go 1,000 miles or more. Speeds in excess of 160, 180 miles an hour. I mean, getting close to that 200-mile threshold.
To some, high-speed rail seems like another train. However, this is no ordinary train. Under the European Union and International Union of Railways, high-speed rail is defined as a transportation system with lines built for speeds of the order of 200 kilometers per hour, or 125 miles per hour, and may even allow for speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour to be reached. That's a top speed of over 180 miles per hour.
good gracious. Okay.
Defining high-speed rail does not end there.
Well, high-speed rail is a transportation system. It's a way of moving people that is done on a traditional railroad, steel wheels, steel rail.
Since its creation in the mid-1960s, high-speed rail has become a very popular method of surface transportation across the world. But how exactly does high-speed rail differentiate itself from more traditional rail systems?
Amtrak is what we have, the best examples at this point. And an Amtrak service is where you're running at 79 miles per hour or less. It's diesel, heavy rail.
those run at 79 miles an hour. So we're talking about a train system that will be operating in certain places at almost twice or even over twice what we're currently used to in California. So it's a very fast system. It's usually, when we're traveling at high rates of speed over, let's say 110 miles an hour, it's on a dedicated right-of-way with tracks, and it's electrically powered.
The high-speed rail system hooks through an overhead catenary system, it hooks into the electric grid. And then at 30-mile increments along the alignment, we have substations that feed power to the system.
High-speed trains differ from conventional trains in various ways. Rather than the typical locomotive and cars seen on traditional rail systems, high-speed trains use what are called train sets.
The trains itself, and I just happen to have one here, that shows up in the camera, looks more like an airplane than a train. An airplane without wings, in fact. So it's a pressurized cabin, just like an airplane is. It's electrically powered, so that it's able to go at very, very high rates of speed, but it's very comfortable inside.
These specialized units are self-propelled, aerodynamically optimized, and incorporate fixed composition design and construction for optimization of power and minimization of weight to ensure high speeds. High-speed rail employs various other high-end technologies and practices to make high-speed operation feasible. This includes specially designed and constructed tracks, in-cab signaling, and positive train control systems which allow for increased capacity on rail networks, interoperability between high-speed and conventional systems, and above all, enhanced safety. So what do Californians think that a high-speed rail system should do for the state? And just as important, what is the California High-Speed Rail Project?
Well, it's an incredibly ambitious project, first of all. It's an 800-mile system which connects most of the major metropolitan areas in all of California. With the exception of Redding, it really hits most of the major cities throughout sort of central and southern California. It's designed to start with the first phase, which would connect San Francisco down to San Jose, and then cut across the Pacheco Mountains, and then come down through the Central Valley cities, including Merced and Fresno and Bakersfield. Then it cuts through the Tehachapi Mountain Range, which is in the south, and goes to the towns of Palmdale, and then eventually into Los Angeles. That's the first phase, and that's the one that our goal is to have a train that can travel from San Francisco and LA 2 hours and 40 minutes. The future extensions will go all the way up to Sacramento and then also down into San Diego via the Inland Empire and San Bernardino and cities out in that area. So that's the sort of the vision for the system. They'll have 24 stations and have all types of different services. Super express trains that go virtually non-stop all the way from San Francisco to LA, and then regional ones that'll make a variety of stops, local trains that'll make all stops. So a wide variety of services to fit everybody's needs.
So how will this massive infrastructure project impact the state?
The intent of the high-speed rail project is to try to provide an alternative form of transportation that will allow to automobiles and air travel for the kind of mid-distance trips from the Bay Area down to Los Angeles, and some of those more mid-range trips in between, so that we can affect and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, improve the opportunity for focused land use growth around transportation stations. And as a result of that, we'll be able to have a reduction in the cost of our energy resources and the use of energy, and also just to improve the air quality as well.
High-speed rail outperforms all other modes of transportation when set within certain parameters. Limitations of resources and a changing environment have created obstacles for transportation systems, resulting in negative impacts to economies and societies. In a 2011 sustainability study by the International Union of Railways, high-speed rail was found to provide efficient solutions that can counter challenges currently facing transportation systems. Transportation in general accounts for approximately 23% of worldwide carbon dioxide emissions. Of that 23%, road and air transport make up 83% of the gases emitted. Rail, on the other hand, only emits 2%, and for high-speed rail, it's even less.
The high-speed rail system will consist of sort of 8-car trains, which will allow you to move about 1,000 people in a very discrete, compact amount of space. And you'll be able to move those people at upwards of 220 miles per hour with very little loss of efficiency because we'll be using steel wheels on steel rail. So in terms of efficiency and getting that bulk of people from point A to point B, you really don't have any other option that's that efficient. So when we talk about capacity, we are talking about being able to move, 2 plane loads of people in far less space.
High-speed rail is also known for being the most carbon-efficient form of transportation, with the average European high-speed train set only generating 17 grams of carbon dioxide for each passenger every kilometer. This is significantly less than cars and aircraft, which average 115 grams and 153 grams, respectively. And being an electric train, high-speed rail systems can run on renewable energy like solar and wind power, with relatively little cost for transition.
There will be no combustion of fossil fuels in the making of our electricity because the board in 2008 made a commitment to 100% renewable energy for operations. So while we'll be using the California grid to actually run the train, what we'll be doing is procuring or producing renewable energy and feeding that into the grid to offset what we use. It's the kind of classic net zero arrangement that net zero energy buildings use, right? The building is hooked into the grid but has, photovoltaics or wind turbines in some instances on the site that it can draw on for power or it can send to the grid. So we'll be doing that same arrangement, only on a much larger scale.
Sound far-fetched? Spain's rail network already operates with 46% of electric power generated from renewable resources. Sweden specifically has taken steps to completely transition their entire rail network to renewable energy in the coming years. California can do the same. With over 500 million trips made in California annually, it is predicted by 2030 that 900 million trips will be made within the state each year.
Well, global warming is of top concern, or it should be of top concern to most Californians. Sea level rise and all of those associated issues. What high-speed train can do, it sort of relates back to what I was just talking about with taking people out of their cars. If we can reduce the amount of carbon that's being put into the air as a result of both air travel and auto travel, that will have a net benefit for greenhouse gas reduction and will help with that sort of very global issue. It can also have benefits for actual congestion, overall traffic congestion in an area. And by having traffic actually move, by reducing the amount of cars on the road network, you can actually let traffic move smoother. And again, that helps with the air quality benefits. So there are a lot of benefits to doing that.
High-speed rail in California will help significantly reduce the number of vehicle miles driven by 320 billion miles over the next 4 decades. This equates to over 146 million hours in saved time each year, and substantial reduction in emissions and pollution. The same principle can apply to air travel as well.
It's about regional jets. It's an equivalent to regional jets.
The delays between San Francisco and LA are such that the traveler finds themselves with, it's not an hour and a half to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles, it's an hour in the car to get to the airport. It's an hour at the airport before you leave. It's an hour flight, and then it's another hour probably at your destination. And then usually 1 out of 4 flights is delayed. So in terms of travel time savings, it's tremendous because you're looking at a 2-hour and 40-minute trip from San Francisco to LA, which should involve, a 15-minute trip on BART to get to the high-speed rail station, or a walk in downtown San Francisco to get from the financial district to the station. 2 hours, 40 minutes to Los Angeles, and you're again right in the heart of Los Angeles.
And the net result there is that you're addressing your short-haul travel market on trains and opening up long-haul routes for their airlines to expand their business model, not be limited by it. So flights from the Bay Area, rather than just going to Southern California, can now go to Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, where they haven't had the capacity to do that before.
High-speed rail not only addresses the issue of greenhouse emissions, but it also uses less land.
Think about trying to address mobility with traditional methods. Freeways construction, and it takes more land than a more narrow right-of-way than a high-speed rail. So high-speed rail has to take land. I'm not trying to underestimate the significance of taking 1 acre of land, of a farmland, for example, or 1 more acre in an urban setting, but it takes less than the traditional approach to solving transportation because it's a smaller footprint.
Through the construction and operation of high-speed rail, an average 2-track rail line only uses 3.2 hectares per kilometer, with a typical width of 25 meters. An average 6-lane European motorway, similar to the Autobahn, uses 9.3 hectares per kilometer with a width of 75 meters. This means high-speed rail lines use 3 times less space than motorways. In fact, high-speed rail lines can be built parallel to existing motorways to maximize land usage.
Highways create an environment. If you're building more highways, you do create an environment where you can have more development all along that highway. All you need is an interchange or intersection. And so then, if you think about it, a highway can induce sprawl because it allows for more development and more development. High-speed rail line doesn't have an off-ramp. High-speed rail lines are intended to be almost exclusively landing in a downtown center where we'd be looking at building a concentrated building, not sprawl. So actually, when it comes to smart growth, if you're familiar with that term, high-speed rail fits perfectly into promoting a more sustainable land use pattern.
We're pretty confident that places that have stations will attract more and more development. So instead of development continuing to sort of go away from the cities and taking up the really valuable farmland that we have in the Central Valley, or any kind of other open space that we have and we really value and want to protect, we're going to see development start to come back in and sort of center on station areas because they're going to be such great, lively, accessible areas. So that's another area that is a top concern, I know, in this state because of our reliance on agriculture. We want to make sure that we're protecting agricultural uses, and this is one way that will help do that.
I was at Caltrain's district director trying to solve growing areas, and they would, subdivisions and subdivisions would go on out, and yet we had to try to figure out a way to get highways out to those subdivisions, and you couldn't keep up with it. As opposed to thinking, okay, let's not sprawl, let's get a more vibrant downtown centers where there's jobs and housing, that sort of thing. So the taking land is going to be a lot less if we go with the high-speed rail just because it's smaller footprint and it's not sprawl-inducing.
In a 2011 UIC sustainability study, rail in general was found to have the smallest land take per passenger kilometer than any other transport mode. Within Europe, the throughput, or amount of people going through a system, was observed to be higher than roads with the same width as a high-speed rail line. High-speed rail uses less land even when compared to air travel. Structures and facilities used to operate and maintain aircraft add to the amount of land take per passenger kilometer. Within the same UIC study, air services and operations at Paris's Charles de Gaulle Airport equate to 3,200 hectares of land used for flights between France and Germany. High-speed rail on the LGV Rhine-Rhone only uses 1,400 hectares of land to reach the same destinations. The economic effectiveness of high-speed rail is dependent on the location of the station and community it serves. The size and age of high-speed rail networks around the world vary, and each one provides different benefits to their respective populations. However, in every instance, all cities that have established a high-speed rail connection have seen positive improvements to the cityscape.
California does not have something equivalent to a high-speed rail station. Transbay Terminal, LA Union Station, yes, let's think of those as being kind of along those lines. A BART station is not a high-speed rail station. Here's why. If you think about the volumes of people, you'll be looking at something like a middle-sized airport volume of people at the station. So now what you're dealing with is not to be negative about some of our stations in California, but there are places where there's a station and just a big parking lot. That's not what this is going to be. This is going to be like if we manage this properly with the land use authority, the city or the county. If we manage this right, these are going to be economic centers. These are going to be destinations. In other words, what you're going to see is vertical development. The land value and value capture will be enormous, where you could go to some BART stations and it's really pretty much a dead spot and it's just a big parking lot. This will be so much more valuable. You're going to see office towers with businesses. You're going to see major retail centers. You're going to see government centers. You're going to see convention centers. You're going to see all these kinds of activities because it's going to be a rich environment for pedestrians. You're going to see parking garages, not open parking lots.
In countries where high-speed rail has been long established, such as Japan, France, and Germany, these improvements are much more visible and tangible. In a 2011 UIC study, in-depth historical research was conducted on cities which had introduced high-speed rail. In the city of Lille, France, the introduction of high-speed rail services has greatly transformed the local area. The addition of the high-speed rail station Eurolille has provided the city with a link to the rest of the European Union. The resulting development surrounding the station area has led to the construction of 70 hectares of mixed-use buildings, including a large convention hall and congressional meeting areas. When compared to a sister city that has not yet established a high-speed rail connection, no observable change was seen in the sister city in recent decades. The same can also be said about the German city of Kassel, which has experienced similar changes to the local landscape following the introduction of a high-speed rail network. Not only was rapid growth seen in the area, but global enterprises were attracted to the city as well. In Japan, where high-speed rail was first introduced to the world, cities along the high-speed rail line all experienced similar positive changes. In every instance, high-speed rail caused a shift in local economies with the introduction of new industries and businesses, while providing cities with a more positive image to the general public. The same concept of growth can be applied to U.S. cities with high economic potential. In California specifically, high-speed rail can provide growth to cities within the state. The Los Angeles metropolitan area, in particular, holds a population of 12.9 million people, along with high-end industries such as film, electronics, aerospace, fashion, finance, tourism, steel, and world trade. This region generates as much as $7.6 billion a year in new business sales, producing up to 55,000 new jobs and $3 billion in new wages. A study by the United States Conference of Mayors found that the introduction of high-speed rail in Los Angeles can provide at least $360 million per year in new spending in the downtown area, supporting roughly 4,000 hotels, restaurants, and retail jobs in that area. Los Angeles, together with other metropolitan regions in California, can see a reduction in travel time along with greater connectivity in regions through the development of high-speed rail.
Once you get the system actually up and running, you also create an environment that is actually more attractive for employers. And one of the things that that I think is really interesting is once you've connected the centers like San Francisco and San Jose to the Central Valley, to a city like Fresno, all of a sudden Fresno becomes a lot more attractive for development and for office functions that might be too expensive to have in the big cities. So you might be able to do bill processing and things like that out in Fresno, and all of a sudden Fresno becomes a new job center for these new types of jobs that couldn't have been there before. that they might even, these other jobs might be in another state. They might be in Nevada or Nebraska. All of a sudden, you have this great connection between these mid-city, these sort of mid-level cities like Fresno and Bakersfield, and the big urban centers like Los Angeles and San Francisco, and they sort of work together to create a more positive economy.
This expansion in accessibility expands the distance where workers can be employed, leading to less unemployment and higher economic power, as well as increased revenue in the region. High-speed rail in California would provide support to local industries and, just like in the cities of Lille and Kassel, provide major urban development opportunities.
Well, let me use the city of San Jose as an example. They've been in the process of completing a station area master plan in and around the Diridon station. They're taking what is currently a largely surface parking area, not a lot of resources or amenities, and they're completely remastering the future planning of the area so that they anticipate using that space that is now currently occupied by surface parking and converting it to commercial retail structures, that by having a resource like high-speed rail center at the Diridon station, and it's right next to the HP Pavilion, so they have some activities in that location. This allows them to focus their growth, develop additional commercial business locations, places where companies can locate, on-street retail supporting those businesses, and create a much more vibrant neighborhood at the Diridon station than exists there right now.
I think, when you look at, where California's economy is with entertainment, tech, and all the rest, there's a huge need for communication and for meeting between those industries, and the high-speed train would be a big part of that.
The economic potential of high-speed rail is not limited to regional impacts and improvements. High-speed rail is a viable system for economic growth in terms of employment and productivity. Similar to the technology market, high-speed rail is constantly subject to new innovations and technological development. High-speed rail always has the potential to be more efficient and environmentally proactive. This demand prompts the constant evolution of high-speed train sets and infrastructure improvements, all of which create jobs. In fact, the World Watch Institute found that highway construction generates fewer jobs than any other form of public infrastructure investment. High-speed rail, on the other hand, generates jobs, both either temporary or permanent, public or private, through its entire life cycle. Further studies have shown that for every 10 new direct jobs created for the rail sector, 14 new jobs are created indirectly. In comparison, for every 10 jobs created for road sectors, only 5 indirect jobs were subsequently formed. Such economic and employment prospects are desirable for California, especially in the Central Valley. This increase in employment will as well be accompanied with an increase in productivity time.
And then if you just have to work, you can sit down and if you work on a laptop or you like to work on your smartphone, you can do that immediately. You don't have to put it away and wait to take off, and fly, and whatever else, and then land. You can work on it the entire time. So that makes it really productive time for you. And probably one of the most impressive things about high-speed trains is their reliability. The fact that in Japan, they measure the amount of delay they experience on their trains almost annually in seconds.
High-speed rail, unlike an automobile and aircraft, can provide an environment in which people can work and be productive during their commute or trip. Acting as an economic catalyst, high-speed rail acts as the driver for new land development, all while increasing mobility and access within regions where high-speed rail services are provided. When factoring its environmental, economic, and technical attributes, high-speed rail can potentially meet the demands and challenges that are seen in California. So, how will high-speed rail be implemented? Plans from the 2012 Revised Business Plan call for a multi-phased system designed to connect San Francisco, the Central Valley, and Los Angeles/Anaheim through a combination of dedicated high-speed rail infrastructure blended with existing urban systems. This system will later be extended to include high-speed rail connections to Sacramento, the state capital, and San Diego via the Inland Empire. The first installment of the high-speed rail system is projected to cost approximately $68 billion. Funding for the first section of the project has already been identified.
The bond measure that was passed by the voters of the state of California is a significant portion of the initial construction funding, the $9.95 billion that was passed in 2008. That is going toward completing the first construction section from the city of Merced to the city of Bakersfield.
Another $3.5 billion has also been given to the High-Speed Rail Authority from the federal government through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act signed by President Obama.
If you think of Southern California and Northern California as the kind of the big target markets, we're going to be building this high-speed rail to connect the two. But we're going to build it in pieces, so it's going to start off a little, it's not going to be from Transbay Terminal to LA Union Station on day one. It's going to be something smaller. At the bookends, then we want to connect into other systems so that we get rail-to-rail connections. High-Speed Rail Authority is investing dollars into the bookends to existing systems so that they're ready for when we're ready to do our initial operating segment, meaning it's not the full length, it's that first piece. And then over time, it'll build itself out till we get to that Transbay Terminal to LA Union Station kind of approach.
The first initial operating segment will run from Merced to the edge of Bakersfield, a distance of approximately 300 miles, and will be serviceable by the year 2022.
Our goal is to not only start in the Central Valley, but then to connect the Central Valley to Southern California so that then we can have a legitimate high-speed train service that can actually then have operations on it. And we're very confident that the operations, the trains actually running and people buying tickets can actually be profitable.
During the following 4 years, additional segments will be added, forming the Bay-to-Basin system. This 410-mile line will link the San Francisco Bay Area with the Los Angeles Basin, with full high-speed rail service from San Jose to the San Fernando Valley. After another 3 years, the Phase 1 blended system will provide full service from the San Francisco Transbay Terminal to Los Angeles Union Station. This phased approach to the high-speed rail implementation in the state will allow for flexibility of funds during construction, as well as reduced impact to the economy and the environment. Such an approach is not uncommon. The TGV, Intercity Express, and the Italian high-speed rail network have specifically used pre-existing rail systems to accommodate high-speed rail operations as construction of the system continued. This blended approach will be used in areas like the San Francisco to San Jose Caltrain corridor and on parts of the Metrolink system in Southern California. This blended system as well provides funds to modernize rail networks like the electrification of the Caltrain line.
What we need is these systems such as Caltrain to be functioning at a high level and have strong ridership and good connectivity to our stations. So it enhances high-speed rail's viability and us getting to the first initial operating segment earliest by raising up the performance of all rail systems. So to the question of how do we affect other rail systems, I'm going to suggest that we bring more riders to them. And they, by the way, bring riders back to us. It's a system, it's a team sport. So we're one member of the team. We might be this big long one that goes stretches throughout the middle part of California. But the reality is that it's a team sport and we need everybody to be performing at their peak. So Caltrain specifically, the High-Speed Rail Authority Board has approved investing $600 million to electrify. That's taking something that Caltrain has been wanting to do for decades, and it's moving it forward and making it whole so we can now move forward and get rid of the diesel. We can go to higher quality, better service, lower operating cost, electric. And then that'll be ready so that we can also share when we bring our electric trains. So we're actually going to get Caltrain up and running in a more sustainable manner, lower operating cost, better equipment, before we even get to the peninsula. But we'll get that up and running, and when we get there, we'll automatically have good connections and compatibility. That, to me, is a win-win situation.
With funding identified, groundbreaking for the project is set to begin late in the summer of 2013. However, some are skeptical and critical of the project.
It costs a lot of money, so where would that money come from?
California in itself has many problems, many issues. And if transportation is one of them, I would think that it would be, further down the list than several other topics that we could bring up.
It's not necessary because the average person does not travel from San Francisco to LA that often.
Project is yet to be funded, right? That we're beginning a project that we don't know how we're going to pay for it yet.
The cost of building it is a little bit expensive, but I don't know, because people are still going to want to drive. I feel like that's going to happen, no matter what.
So the cost has gone up, the time to build has gone up, the ridership has shrunk. And part is still unfunded. I put all of that together and I see a shaky deal to begin with.
Indeed, arguments against the high-speed rail system range greatly, with some questioning both the cost of the system, its effectiveness, and even the concept of high-speed rail itself. In a 2012 informational flyer called Separating Myth from Reality, said the system will require high levels of government funding on a continuing basis, and, when combined with the $98 billion price tag, the state project will become too costly to construct. The flyer also claims that, at low ridership estimates, high-speed rail will never achieve a return on investment on greenhouse gas emissions, resulting in permanent environmental damage, and that no high-speed rail train sets have ever been certified and approved to run on United States railways. Therefore, no bullet train may be imported or used in the United States. The highspeedboondoggle.com website as well claims that businesses and farms will be destroyed in the process of implementing high-speed rail, and that jobs will be shipped overseas. Critics also claim that no one will ride the trains and that everyone drives cars in California. And perhaps the most vocal of all criticism, the train to nowhere, in which many people argue that starting construction in the California Central Valley, where the region is less dense and less populated, is a poor and ill-informed choice. So, with huge expenses, low ridership, and poor planning touted as potential drawbacks to the project, is high-speed rail suited for California? Let's start by looking at ridership and economic viability. In the 2012 revised business plan, price projections for the project have dropped significantly from $98 billion to $68 billion. The Transport Politic website also stated the project's per-mile costs, even with the cost increase, are not hugely different from those in other developed countries for rail systems offering speeds of up to 220 miles per hour. When the cost of the project is factored into California's greater economic scope over the next 2 or 3 decades, this very conservative estimate suggests that a high-cost rail project would not only represent only 0.18% of a heavily depressed state economy over 22 years, but also that it would account for 21% of the broader state transportation budget, which would remain mostly focused on highway construction and maintenance, as in the status quo.
The goal is not to use resources that are committed to other sources like education. The challenge in California generally with the initiative system that we've had in California for decades, when a bond is passed, it generally doesn't have a funding source attached with it. California has never, whether it's been an education bond or a transportation bond or a prison bond, has rarely had actual funding sources, say a half-cent sales tax or some other revenue source that would be dedicated to that funding element. So we have a history of taking bold initiatives and trying to identify a direction from a policy standpoint, and then working budget year to budget year to ensure that we're funding that program that the people have identified as a priority, as well as continuing to sustain our other needs. In this case, especially as it relates to infrastructure, this is about keeping the house standing. How are we going to keep the state of California economically viable and vibrant going into the future? So we need to devote funds to keeping the house standing, to keep the state in good repair. At the same time, you still find ways in your budget to determine how to provide food and other needs that you have that still need to be met. The state has done that in an ongoing way and will just continue to do that. And that's really true of any infrastructure project, whether it's high-speed rail or a bridge or a new freeway or any other transportation resource that we've ever funded.
And high-speed rail is not as expensive as critics make it out to be. While the informational flyer may have pointed out France subsidizes all of its rail operations, it failed to realize that Japan, Spain, and numerous other nations as well have high-speed rail systems with significantly less net cost and subsidies.
Along with that, we're looking at certainly additional federal resources, if not necessarily for high-speed rail, to help us construct some of the regional rail improvements and connections that will feed travelers to high-speed rail. We're also looking at private investment. This is a basic premise of certainly the high-speed rail business plan, and the revised business plan has focused on seeking public-private partnerships and establishing those public-private partnerships. And we've already gotten interest from not just private industry, but also foreign governments who are interested in investing in the California high-speed system. And then finally, more innovative funding possibilities.
In 2012, the San Francisco Planning and Urban Research Association published an article which detailed viable funding alternatives for the high-speed rail project. In their article, Getting High-Speed Rail on Track, 6 methods were proposed for funding the system, even if federal funding were to become unavailable. The first is value capture, which proposes a modest impact fee and tax surcharges near future high-speed rail stations to help fund the project. Cap and trade is another valuable asset in which funds generated from the system can be used to partially fund the completion of the project. Tolling can as well generate funds by installing tolling stations on high-volume roadways. This will not only generate substantial funds for the project, but can motivate drivers to start using transit. A slightly increased gas tax, vehicle licensing fee, and green energy general obligation bond to electrify Bay Area rail systems can help fill the rest of the funding gap for high-speed rail, providing more than $43 billion in purely state and locally generated funding.
Many people balk at the price tag for a system like high-speed rail, which is largely because we're starting from scratch. The revised business plan from last year has directed our development of a blended system in the Bay Area and in Southern California. So we're using some of the existing infrastructure to operate our high-speed system on and coexist with existing commuter systems. That reduces some of the costs, but overall it's still a much more cost-effective system to deliver than any of those other transportation infrastructure elements that we'd have to pursue to accommodate the growth that we're going to experience.
Why now? Let me just answer that for a sec, because in times of economic hardship like we have right now, the one thing that we do have going for us is we get a great price on the construction performed now. You know, there are a lot of contractors out there that are out of work and are really hungry for work because they have people that they want to keep on their payroll, they have equipment that they need to pay for, and they're better off, you know, getting a reduced profit but keeping both the people and the tools operating in order to keep their companies going. And so right now is a great time to be doing work. Another big project here in the Bay Area, like Doyle Drive, where they built a massive tunnel and a new highway, you know, their estimates, the actual bids came in, I think it was somewhere like 20% less than what they expected. And that's because everybody's starving for work. So it's a great environment for actually doing work right now in what feels like a time when we can't afford to do anything.
So, if we fund high-speed rail, what about ridership? California is notorious for its car-centric culture, and with the conveniences of air travel, there's no need for a high-speed train, right?
The goal here is to help recreate an ethic of transit and transit use in California. The Trans Bay Terminal before World War II was a rail station, not just a bus station. They used to do almost 24 million passengers a year on rail. The bottom deck of the Bay Bridge had rail on it. So California had a transit and a rail ethic.
Are Californians going to change their behavior? Right? Are they going to start to rely on the train maybe more than they currently do on their own personal car or flying? And I can say that what we have studied and what we know is that in countries where they've established high-speed train systems, let's say recently in Spain, that places where people used to fly to get to places now take the train, and there are no longer flights going nearly as frequently between major cities, because now the train is just so much more convenient because you can get from downtown to downtown that you don't need to fly anymore. So you see an actual change of behavior of people.
Several years ago, well, I'll suggest even today there's still some, but there was stronger concern and anxiety about ridership numbers. In other words, these are projections done by modeling, very sophisticated modeling in some cases. But there was a question, how do you know you're not looking at this with rose-colored glasses on and it's really, you're overestimating? Well, one, let me just note that we're using worldwide experience. In other words, when we have similar distances, similar volumes of people, what is the behavior when they introduce high-speed rail? What was the outcome? Because we need a high-speed rail program. We won't have, by the way, high-speed electric trains running unless the business model works. Because it is by statute required to be, we won't be doing operating subsidies. The fare box has to pay for operation and maintenance, and it has to be done by a concessionaire, in other words, a contractor. So we have worldwide experience to rely on. We've gone back and we've, by using an independent international expert panel, we've gone and looked at our ridership modeling, which is a market-based kind of analysis, and we've made it, I can't say bulletproof with modeling, but I can say that we have gone in and built a high level of confidence that we are estimating all the assumptions in a conservative manner so that we have rock-solid confidence in our projected numbers. So our initial operating segment, that's a term we use for when it actually is economically feasible to bring the new trains. That's how we build that threshold, when we know we'll have an initial operating segment. You had spoke to Californians responding to this, and this is a great question because yes, Californians love their cars, and we're a car culture. And I think most would agree that Southern California, Los Angeles, is probably the mecca for car culture if you were to kind of look at California as a whole. At least it's a hot spot for cars culture. It's amazing to watch Metro and MetroLink as they introduced rail service. People said, I have a choice. I can have an unreliable commute on the freeway and have my nice car, but I have an unreliable, I'm not, on any given day I don't know if I'm going to make it to work on time and how much I'm going to burn. Or I can sit on a train that makes it on time, it's on time all the majority of the time. And that I don't have to drive. It's more cost effective for me because I don't spend as much money. I can have a little more time to do things I like to do during that commute hours instead of driving. Every one of the increases in the Metro and MetroLink down in Southern California have been, the ridership has just gone right up through the roof.
And it does not end there. Caltrain, Amtrak's San Joaquin, Pacific Surfliner, and Capital Corridor are as well experiencing exploding ridership, and contrary to the notion that no high-speed train can run on U.S. tracks, the United States already has its very own high-speed rail system. Amtrak's Acela Express operates on the Northeast Corridor from Boston to Washington, D.C. at a top speed of 160 miles per hour. Not only is it fast, it is Amtrak's only profitable line on the entire national system.
You certainly see the opportunity that rail transit provides in the Northeast along the Acela corridor. There's huge usage, and as they improve their service, they're starting to cut into the short-haul airline route between New York and Boston and New York and Washington. Between New York and Boston, they've gone from 30% to 60% on rail versus airlines. So those travelers have come out of planes and gone onto the trains. Between New York and Washington, they've gone from 45% to almost 83%.
And just like Acela, the high-speed trains in California can as well be built on American soil. Various transport companies such as Siemens and Alstom have their very own manufacturing plants stationed in California. These same companies also intend to manufacture high-speed train sets out of California when the project comes to fruition. This creates jobs and does not send them overseas. So, what about constructing in the Central Valley? Is high-speed rail really a train to nowhere?
I totally get how someone might approach this, because they're thinking that we're going to go out and in a few months we're going to build a railroad. You know, this will take a long time to build. If I may, let's look at the interstate system. Most people have driven on freeways and they understand that the United States interstate system. You know, that started in the Midwest in one little spot, a highway to nowhere. And that's because they were just building and building and building. And eventually you got the New York to Los Angeles. I mean, you got everything covered, but they started somewhere. We're building the backbone of the high-speed rail program, and yes, we're starting in the valley. We're putting money to work as quickly as possible, which, by the way, puts jobs. And we're going to be trying to get to that place where it does exactly what high-speed rail can do that no one else can do, and that is to connect the two urban centers. And so it's not, when we start our construction, you could go out or at any given day and say, well, this just goes nowhere. It just goes from here to here. That's correct. We're in the process of building something. It'll take 10 years to get a lot of this in place. But the trick is, when we're building, how soon can we get to that place where we cross that threshold where all of a sudden, oh, now we're connected with these other rail systems and we've got the ability to bring in the train, the high-speed rail, and then we're going to continue to build as we go, because the high-speed rail, if done right, will actually, the private sector that comes in with their trains, they'll get so much return on the revenue box that we'll also get money from them to continue the capital construction of more track and more track as we work to those terminal ends. The blended system basically says, let's use existing rail assets, invest a little bit in them so they're operating more efficiently, so that we can start early and not wait until, we're not going to wait until someday magically there'll be an electric train that shows up in Transbay Terminal or into LA Union Station. We're going to actually put these trains to work in a phased approach. You can go look at the Northeast Corridor, go across the country to the Northeast Corridor, and you're going to see a system that is blended, that is stepping in phases and being enhanced in phases. Across the world, there are very few examples where it was all done at one time and it wasn't blended. Taiwan was a really rare exception, was built with a lot of private dollars, and they basically went in and built an operating system from day one. But all across Europe, most of Asia, you see, Japan, who's been at this the longest, they've been building a blended system where they build what they can, it functions, it adds value, it creates more ridership, they build more, and it just keeps going. So the blended approach is the most economically rational way to move forward and get some early benefits, and that's what we're doing.
Not to mention, the Central Valley is resident to over 1 million people. California boasts the 9th largest economy in the world, and the largest single economy entity worldwide without a high-speed rail system at least under construction. California shares the same geography, population, and population density as Spain, which hosts a flourishing high-speed rail network that is rapidly expanding. California Central Valley cities like Fresno and Bakersfield are already 6 to 9 times larger than the smallest French cities served by high-speed rail. The California High-Speed Rail Project is not a train to nowhere. Rather, it is a train that needs to be built now and here. California is at a crossroads. To ensure that the state's infrastructure remains capable of meeting the demands of this new century, investments need to be made now to help secure the California of the future. the state is in need of a comprehensive solution to combat the growing problems that we will face as time moves onward. Investments need to be made now to ensure that the economic and societal welfare of the state does not fall into disarray, and as populations continue to rise, the demands of the new generation will need to be addressed.
Now, reasonable people can disagree about what the appropriate transportation mode going into the future should be to address the growth that I talked about earlier that California is expecting. We're going to add the population of the state of New York as we go into the next 30 years. How do you move those people around? We're already congested in many of our city centers. Certainly in Southern California and the Bay Area, we have a great deal of congestion. How do you move those people around? And what high-speed rail offers is an opportunity to move those people in a way that doesn't call for building additional lane miles on freeways, finding additional runways and runway capacity at airports, additional gate capacity at airports, additional flight capacity at airports and up and down the state, which we really don't have, and that would come at almost twice the cost of delivering a high-speed system.
High-speed rail is a key component to the solution.
The great thing is that we have lots of models around the world of what a high-speed train system can be. Again, I've had the privilege of seeing it and experiencing it in Korea and in Japan. Japan's system, which is 1964, what is that, 50 years old? They're already putting their original high-speed trains in museums. I mean, that's how long they've been operating high-speed trains. In Japan and in particular, it's just part of how you live. It's a way of life, and it's not the big deal that everybody thinks it's going to be. It's just going to become so second nature to us as to how we get around. So I think when Californians, and Californians are well traveled. When I was out talking with people on the peninsula about the high-speed train project, when I would ask how many people have ridden a high-speed train, half the room would raise their hands, and I would say, well, what did you all think? And they say, oh, it was great. I was in Spain. I went, from Madrid to somewhere else, and it was fantastic. And you had a glass of wine. It was really very, luxurious. And I said, well, that's what we're trying to do here. And people would say, oh, but we won't be able to do it. We won't be able to deliver on that. And there was this sort of confidence problem with a lot of people that I talked to that we would actually be able to deliver such a high-speed train problem. Now, I think and I know that the High-Speed Rail Authority is talking very with great interest with manufacturers and from other countries to really replicate what is in Spain, to replicate what is in Germany or whatever, and bring the best technology and experience to this project so that we can actually deliver on a project that is equal to or better than anything that you've ridden on anywhere else in the world.
High-speed rail has the ability to reform California and lead not only the state, but the nation as a whole in a new direction. Though there may be criticisms and some potential risk, the economic and environmental benefits brought forth by high-speed rail vastly outweighs both.
Governor Brown said it best when he said that California is poised to do great things again. The state of California has a legacy of doing great things and delivering great infrastructure projects. We built two of the greatest bridges in the world during the deepest, darkest depression in our history. The California Water Project, the UC system, the CSU system. We have a legacy of developing programs and projects to sustain our people and the state in an ongoing way for many decades. High-speed rail gives us an opportunity to do that for the next generation of Californians, to allow them to maintain the economic vibrancy of the 8th largest economy in the world, and it sets itself up as being an integral part of that future legacy.
High-speed rail is a tested technology with an extensive history across the globe, bringing with it high economic potential by providing sustainable, environmentally friendly transportation that can revitalize and transform California's transportation network, society, and economy while meeting the demands of the 21st century and beyond.